This is episode 82 of the 99 Forever podcast. I'm Eric Friesen, and my guest tonight is making his sixth appearance on the podcast. He's the digital content coordinator for the Edmonton Elks and a contributor to the hockeywriters.com, Brian Swane. Brian, it's good to have you back on the show.
Eric, how are you doing?
I'm doing good, man. It's a great time for the Oilers. Connor McDavid had his birthday this week, and I also had my birthday on Sunday, so we both got our birthday wish with a big win to keep their winning streak going. And overall, just staying warm in this frigid cold weather that I know that we're both experiencing right now in Edmonton and Saskatoon.
Yeah, we're part of everyone's getting hit with it pretty hard. I know we're just about out of the worst of it now here in Edmonton, so hopefully that comes your way too.
Yeah, well, 1 week from today I'll be in Mexico, so I'll be
okay.
going to leaving the minus 35 weather and going to the plus 35 weather.
Oh, the timing would have been perfect if this had arrived a week later, right?
Yeah, exactly. I was actually thinking originally of booking the trip in February that would have lined up with the Oilers bye week, but I'll be down there still watching all the games. I managed to watch last year when I went to Mexico. I watched all three games that they played the week I was down there, including another one on the flight home, which was a little more challenging with Wi-Fi issues. But I always never want to miss a game.
Is it the Sportsnet broadcast you get there?
I think it's satellite, but yes, okay. it was the Sportsnet feed for them. Right. They have a sports bar there. Well, multiple ones on the resort, but I asked the guy working at the bar just if he could turn one of the TVs over to the hockey game, and they were able to get the Oilers game for me, which was awesome. I didn't know if they'd be able to put it on or not. And it's funny, another day that I came in there one evening and there was a WHL game going on the TV. I think it was Moose Jaw and Prince Albert. And I'm like, getting the Oilers game on TV in Mexico is one thing, but to see like two Saskatchewan teams from the Dub playing, that really caught me off guard.
That is pretty wild. Moose Jaw and Prince Albert in Mexico, eh? There you go.
Yeah, I didn't think I'd ever see that. But there's a lot of Canadians down there too, so I'm guessing someone else in the sports bar had requested it. But
right.
So like I said, it is episode 82. I've had you on the podcast in the past when an episode number has matched an Oilers Legends jersey number, but I think the greatest significance that number 82 has to the Oilers would probably be the year Wayne Gretzky broke the single season goals record and hit 200 points for the first time, wouldn't it?
I guess so. Yeah, I'm just thinking. Well, you got me thinking. What was going on in 82? Was that the Miracle on Manchester?
It was. I know that was 82. I was trying to pick a more positive one, but. That was the first year that the Oilers really ascended to the top of the standings and became a legitimate Stanley Cup contender.
Right.
They ended up, obviously, like you said, bowing out in a stunning upset to the LA Kings, but they were basically from that point on, it was a run of dominance from 81, 82 through the rest of the decade.
Yeah, I'm sure I've always kind of, obviously it was a little bit before, not necessarily before my time, but I certainly don't remember any of it. But I've always looked at that 82 years kind of like, the growing pains, and they obviously learned the lessons from that, because then it was 5 of the
next 7. Well, yeah.
And so six of the next 8 years in the Stanley Cup final.
And if you even want to expand it more, from 1982. 83 season through 1991-92, so a span of 10 years, they made the conference final 8 times.
Yeah, which is pretty incredible. I mean, especially if you look back since then, 2 appearances in the conference finals, I think. So I mean, it just shows you, Edmonton was spoiled back then.
Oh, without a doubt. I mean, and even though, you obviously now working with the Elks, that was a pretty special time for not just Oilers fans, but Edmonton sports fans in general. They were treated to a lot of championships from about, let's say, the late 70s through to the early 90s.
Yeah. They, I think 5 Grey Cups in a row, and then a couple more in the 80s. And yeah, I guess just off the top of my head, I think there was between the late 70s and up till the Oilers win in 1990, I think there must have been a combination of 11 or 12 championships in the city. So like basically an average of one per year. So yeah, not bad.
Just off the top of my head, like you said, they won the 5 in a row, 78, 79, 80, 81, 82. And then I believe they also won 87 and 93.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, you got it.
And in 89, they were the heavy favorites. I think that was the year that they set the CFL record.
That was the year, set the CFL record for wins. Saskatchewan upset them in the West Final. I don't remember if Saskatchewan. I don't think they won the Grey Cup.
They did.
Oh, they did. Okay.
That was only their second Grey Cup in history, and it was it's considered one of the greatest Grey Cup games ever. They beat the Hamilton Tiger Cats, and
that's right. And then it was, I think, not until about 2013 or so when they won again. 2014.
They did win in 2013 at home. 2007 was the next one. And then they won their fourth championship in 2013. They were that one, of course, being in Regina, making it extra special. But funny enough, when the Riders won the Grey Cup on November 26th, 1989, that was actually the day I was christened.
Oh wow! Really? Wow.
Yeah.
That's wild.
Yeah, I was christened that morning at the church, and then the Riders won the Grey Cup that evening. So pretty memorable day for my family, at least anyway.
That's very cool. Did your family take you to did you have like a christening / Grey Cup party afterwards, or what?
No, I've heard the story a bunch of times. That we were over at my Nana's house that day. My dad was putting in new flooring in her bathroom or something like that during the day, just leading up to the big game. So we were all just kind of over at her house. But for my family, especially like my dad and uncle and great uncle who were there, they were all big Rough Rider fans, of course. So yeah, pretty memorable day overall.
That's awesome.
And just going back to the Oilers now, and most of the individual and club records set during the 1980s are unbreakable. But this year's Oilers squad accomplished something on Saturday that even the Gretzky-led teams never did. With a 2-1 overtime victory against the Montreal Canadiens on Hockey Night in Canada, the Edmonton Oilers broke the franchise record for the longest winning streak at 10 games. Brian, first off, do you find it surprising that even those dynasty teams during the 1980s and early 90s never managed to win 8 straight games? And secondly, if someone would have told you back in November when the Oilers were 2-9-1 and at the bottom of the league that over the next 2 months they would have separate 10-game and 8-game winning streaks, would you have believed them?
No, I would never. I probably thought there was actually, I don't know. I mean, to be honest, when the coaching change came down, I wasn't at first. I was not a big fan of that move, and I didn't think it was the right thing to go. And I wasn't sure where this team was going to end up. But so, I mean, it's quite remarkable. They're at 18-3 in the last 21 games, I believe. Right? It's like,
yeah,
this is all time great streaks, not just in Oilers history, but in NHL history. But to get back to your first part of your question there, it doesn't really surprise me that that the Gretzky or the 80s teams didn't do it, because I think, and this is not at all to take away from anything that the team has accomplished right now, because it's absolutely spectacular what they've done, but it's easier to have winning streaks these days when every game must have a winner. Back then, of course, like I have to look it up, but I think the Oilers probably had a longer undefeated streak.
Yeah, they did. I think to start the 84-85 season, I believe.
Yeah, so like when a game would end in a tie back then, of course, now that game is going to shootout and someone's going to have to win. And obviously the Oilers have, I mean, just in this last 10 game stretch, I think they've won 1 in a shootout and 2 in overtime. Yeah. So of course, in overtime now is much more suited to produce a winner as well with the 3-on-3, whereas before in the past, I mean, it was it was just like any other part of the game where 5-on-5. So So yeah, so like I said again, it does. I'm not saying that at all to discredit what this team has done because it's an amazing accomplishment. But I always kind of think of it that way, that this, it's just um the back then I almost compare like what would be like an undefeated streak compared to a winning streak now.
Right, and I just looked it up. So to start the 1984-85 season, the Oilers were 12-0-3, so a 15-game unbeaten streak.
I mean, that's absolutely like think about that, and
Yeah.
and of course, who knows, right? If they did have shootouts back then, with I got to think this team would be pretty good, or that team
I
would
don't
be
think
pretty
they
good
would
at
make it to
shootouts.
many shootouts, to be honest. Can you imagine 3-on-3 overtime, Gretzky, Curry, and Paul Coffey? I just
Game over.
Yeah, I think
Pretty
that
much, right?
they
Yeah.
I mean, Gretzky's point totals would be even higher. I can't imagine they would ever lose an overtime game as long as they had possession. Those three with that much open ice and the creativity that was displayed on a nightly basis back in the 1980s, that would have been something to watch. And I really wish that we would have seen that.
Yeah, no, it's kind of fun to imagine what it would have been like to see those, and you can toss any number of any other guys in there too. Like I would have loved to see Glenn Anderson in that kind of a
Yeah.
situation. But
Oh, I
yeah,
mean,
so
yeah, a second line of Messi and Anderson with their speed. I mean, if Gretzky and Curry didn't finish it within the first 30 seconds of overtime, you'd probably see those two next out over the boards. And yeah, it would have been just waves on wave of talent that would have been very tough for the opposition to stop.
it's actually kind of fun just to think about, like, if you go, say that the 3-on-3 existed over the course of the Oilers' history, and just go through each kind of 3 or 4 or 5 year span, and look at, like, okay, who would have been the ideal three-man unit to send over the boards for overtime. Like, think about the late '90s teams. You could have had Wade Garrett and maybe Yanni Niinema.
Yeah.
That it's kind of cool to think about.
And also, just to give credit to the modern day Oilers as well. Now, these are overtime losses, so it's still a point streak, but it's not like the 12-0-3 where the Oilers 3 extra points were ties. But
Right.
in 2004, they had a 16-game point streak, and just this past season, if you include playoffs, the Oilers had a 21-game point streak, going from the last, I guess it would be 15 games of the regular season and 6 games against the LA Kings in the playoffs, where they were 18-0-3. So, I mean, that's a pretty impressive run as well. And I'm sure if you go back further, like this 1984-85 season where we said the Oilers started 12-0-3, they also won the final 3 games of the 84 Stanley Cup final. So if we want to include playoffs as well, it was 18 straight games without a loss.
Right. And I'd be curious too what how they closed out the previous regular season. What their regular season undefeated streak would be like. Because I have seen, it's been interesting that I have seen some like a lot of places will just list like a single season record, but often too you'll see like or records that span over multiple seasons. So I mean, that team could have, who knows, I wouldn't be surprised if they closed out the previous season with, like, 4 or 5 straight wins. That wouldn't be out of the ordinary for them.
No, I'm just checking it right now, and they finished the season on a 7-game point streak. They had 6 wins and 1 loss. So if you're just if we take the Stanley Cup final and we're just talking regular season games, then it was
18-0-4, I think.
It'd be oh no, I apologize. There's a loss in there, not a tie. They lost. So they finished the season on a 6-1-0 run. But still, 1 regulation loss in a span of 22 games.
Yeah, that's kind of good.
But I mean, that's the mid 80s Oilers, right? Like, that's what you would expect from the 84/85 kind of era.
Yes. Yeah, no, for sure.
And Brian, just bringing it back to the 23-24 Oilers now, like we said, they had that terrible start to the season that obviously cost Jay Woodcroft his job. Did you ever imagine that a 10-game and 8-game winning streak would be coming for this group in a matter of just 2 months?
No, no. This has been just an incredible run. And it really, it's almost like just like a complete 180 that with this team from and it coincides, almost exactly with the coaching change too. And I guess we can. That's a whole other topic. How much we want to get into crediting, how big of an impact the coaching change has had, and how much of it is just the players responding to that. But yeah, I didn't see this coming. I mean, I didn't think they were going to continue to be stuck in last place or second to last in the NHL overall standings all year. But it was, there was not. There were times there when there was not a lot you would look at to make you think that they're just going to suddenly turn around and reel off a 18-3 stretch.
Yeah, and I mean, if you look at how Oilers fans were reacting on Twitter and just the community at large, I was seeing a lot of people saying this season is more disappointing than any of the Decade of Darkade seasons because the expectations were so high this year. I mean, the Oilers were widely considered Stanley Cup contenders, if not Stanley Cup favorites coming into the season. And for them to get off to such a terrible start, especially after showing up to training camp 2 weeks ahead and having all those captain skates together, you just figured they were going to hit the ground running. 8 of their first 12 games were against non-playoff teams from the year before. Everything was just lining up for them to have a great start, and they just fell flat on their face. And now here they are, almost at the halfway point of the season now, and they're finally playing the type of hockey that we sort of expected them to have out of the gate.
Yeah, I mean, it's it was 12 games, or I guess, right? And that's all it was. I mean, that's that's about what 1/7 of the season or so. So I mean, it's if you go back, this team has usually had actually traditionally sometimes seems to happen around the holiday season, right, where they go into these little
December's always
slumps.
been a tough month for them, and this year it was kind of the opposite. It was and even when I've had Bruce McCurdy on my podcast in the past, and he's an Oilers historian, he said it's always been a thing for the Oilers. Even back during the 80s they would have their December slump, but I'm glad they were able to buck that trend this year and actually start their winning streak, because they needed it considering how bad their October and November was.
Yeah, and now here they are, and if you just look at where they are in the standings, it's quite remarkable. We're not even at the halfway point of the season yet. I mean, I guess technically the NHL is at the halfway point of the season, but the Oilers haven't even played half their games yet.
Well, no, because they had 2 5-day breaks in December alone.
Yeah, so it already feels like this has been like 4 seasons in one, kind of, right? But it's crazy to think that the schedule isn't even halfway over. So, I mean, I don't put anything. I don't think there's anything you can really rule out about what this team can accomplish yet. There's still 43 games still to go.
Yeah,
that's they can do a lot.
And Brian, we always hear the sort of the idea that 80% or 75% of the teams that are in the playoffs on American Thanksgiving end up making the playoffs. Do you find it kind of ironic that the Oilers ended up turning their season around with that 5-0 win over the Washington Capitals on American Thanksgiving? Because at that point they were still well out of the playoffs, but that was the point where everything got back on track.
Yeah, right. That's where it starts the 18-3 stretch, I think.
Right.
Yeah, I guess it's kind of poetic. I kind of actually I think the turning point of the season you could almost look at and this is kind of an obscure thing, but although it did get a lot of play on social media, the previous game the night before US Thanksgiving, when they're in Carolina, and there's this shot of McDavid on the bench just looking like completely distraught.
Yeah.
And Draisaitl is, I think you know what I'm talking about, right?
I do.
Draisaitl sitting next to him and kind of like just gives him a little tap, like, you know what, it's going to be all good. We're going to get through. So, and McDavid just looks like, he just looks like he's lost his dog or something, right? Like you can tell you could tell how much this like what the Oilers had been going through was weighing on him. It was just like but I think it's almost like in that moment, it's just like they decided, like Draisaitl was like, you know what, you know what, I got you, we got each other, and you know what, enough of this.
Right.
And since then, I mean, it's just been unbelievable. So I think it's kind of like a little trivial random thing, but I just remember looking at that night, and I think it was interesting to see how people reacted to that scene, because some people were like, there were some people kind of being critical of McDavid for, I think, there's almost like saying like he's crying on the bench and stuff like this, and I just looked at it like, you know what, this team has been through a lot, and as the captain of the team, he's probably it's weighed on him more than anything, and this is just somebody who is so engaged and wants to succeed so badly, and it's so important to him. You're just seeing that raw emotion come out right now.
Well, I mean, Draisaitl probably is a little bit more expressive about his, feelings. I mean, he even said that in that Mark Spector's article, that sometimes, his body language might give off the wrong impression at times or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that outside of Edmonton, a lot of, non-Oilers fans like to make a lot out of McDavid's reaction to things on the bench and come to their own conclusions about whether he's happy or not about his time here. That started right back from when the Oilers won the draft lottery in 2015. I just find it kind of funny that the people who don't support the Oilers, especially out east, they tend to really focus on that any time that he looks angry or upset, but there's never that same discussion about his facial reactions when he's looks over the moon excited after a big goal by a teammate or an Oilers win. And I think, he just wants to win so badly. And it's like you said, they're both intense competitors. They want to win as much as anyone. Hockey is their life. And, they just pour everything they have into this team. And to see the team get off to the horrible start that they had this year, of course they're going to look visibly frustrated. And I think it also, you have to remember that McDavid was playing hurt through a large chunk of the early part of the season. So that limited his effectiveness. And I don't care what team you are around the league, if your best player is out of the lineup or not playing at his full capabilities, it's going to affect the whole team.
No, you're absolutely right. And I don't think there's anything wrong with looking angry or upset, or like, I really thought that was a really poignant moment with those two on the bench, and you could just see it just
it all turned around after that.
I think it was almost a cathartic moment for them, and it's just like I don't, like I say, I probably make a bit more out of that than I should, but I don't think it's a coincidence that from that moment on, it's just like this team has turned it all around.
Yeah, no question about it. I just, they are the leaders of this team, and they probably take a lot of it on themselves to get this group to where they want to be. We've heard them speak countless times over the years about, what winning in Edmonton would mean to them, how much they want to win, how much they want to be here. And like I said earlier, because of the expectations for this season, it probably just felt like we need to change something in a hurry, because if we don't get to the playoffs, we can't win that Stanley Cup that we're expected by many to get to this year. So now they're back on track, and it looks like they're just going to continue to head in the right direction. But before we talk more about the streak, I just want to go back to 2001 when the Oilers actually set the record of 9 straight wins. And there were a couple times during that era where the Oilers went on impressive late season runs to either sneak into the playoffs or just miss. And I know you have a real fondness for those Oiler teams from the late 90s and early 2000s. That was, when I was really starting to follow the Oilers a lot. And I just want to know, what memories do you have from that 9-game winning streak 23 years ago?
Oh man, I have so many. Like, I can actually remember some of those games and like where I was listening. I think that was my first or second year out of high school. So yeah, I absolutely remember the game that broke the record in Tampa Bay. The the
Eric Brewer
ninth
scored
win.
the winner, right?
Eric Brewer scored the winner in overtime. The Oilers were up 3-0 in the first period in that game, and Tampa came all the way back, made it 3-3. Then Oilers went ahead 4-3. Then Tampa forced overtime, and then Brewer got to be the hero. But yeah, there's so many little things in that streak that really make up, that are part of a larger Oilers story. Like, I think Tommy Salo had a stretch where he went like 2.5 or 3 games without giving up a goal, and that's the longest. Or maybe I think it might have been surpassed since, but it was at that point in time the longest shutout streak by an Oilers goalie. And the crazy thing is too, when that streak started, they were like just floating right around the playoff cut line. When the streak ended, they were just floating right around the playoff cut line too. Like that, it was that challenging to make the playoffs in 2000, 2001 in the West, because there were a lot of really young upstart teams that year that were pressing to get in at the end. I think LA, Phoenix, now Arizona, was in the race, and the Oilers needed to do that just to get into the playoffs, and that was that was a great team. That was a really fun team. That was Mike Comrie's first year. Anson Carter had been traded for Bill Guerin. He was really starting to hit his stride on the line with Doug Waite. Of course, Ryan Smith was a big part of that, and that was Brewer's first year, I believe, with the team, and that was the year before he'd get named to the Olympic team in 2002. So he was really starting to come into his own too. Nienema and Hammerlick were still around, and then you had the crew of the MGM crew, right? Marchand, Greer, Murray, Moreau was on there. George the Rock, like, what a crew.
Actually, Eric Brewer also scored a goal in the first game of that Olympics for Canada in that 5-2 loss to Sweden. I still remember that goal. And it was great to see him make the team. I don't think that I thought that he was going to get there eventually, but I mean, it turned out to be a pretty good trade with the Oilers in 2000, picking him up for, I believe, Hammerlick.
Yeah, no, that was an amazing trade. I think Brewer's one of the more underrated defensemen or underappreciated defenseman that has played in the Oilers in the last, I guess 20 to 25 years. I thought he completely deserved to be on that Olympic team. I know some people will probably say it was the Oilers connections that got him there. Maybe so, but he had a whale of a tournament when he was there too. Like that, he was perfectly suited for the role he played on that team.
For sure. And I actually thought he was going to be a 10-year Oiler or more. But of course, when the Chris Pronger trade happened, it makes sense that that's the defenseman they would want back in the deal. Mm-hmm. When you're giving up arguably the best or second best defenseman in the league, you're going to have to give up your top young defender as well. But that trade ultimately worked out pretty well for Edmonton. So I would still do it again.
Yeah, well, I guess you can't argue with the result of getting to within one game of the Stanley Cup, but Brewer was a great Oiler. He was part of that big part of that crew there from 2000, 2001, 2, 3. That they weren't going to be contending for a Stanley Cup, but man, they would always do everything they could to get into the playoffs, and then give Dallas hell once they got there.
Yeah, and I didn't plan on asking this, but it just kind of sparked a question in my head. Like, if you think back to the Heritage Classic, which I went to in late October, an awesome event, by the way, put on by the Oilers at Commonwealth Stadium. One of the most memorable games I've ever been to. I'm now 2-0 in outdoor games that the Oilers have played in. But the one thing that I think was missing from that weekend was an alumni game. And there was definitely an appetite for it for the fans. I guess that the organization maybe was concerned about the ice quality, playing 2 games in a short period of time. But I really think that this was a great opportunity to have players from a new generation of Oilers alumni instead of going back to all the 80s greats, which, I mean, I love to see. When I was in Winnipeg in 2016 and saw the Oilers alumni up against the Jets alumni, getting to see Gretzky for probably the first and only time in my life play in a game was something I'll never forget, as well as all the other legends. But I thought this was going to be a time when we were going to see some of those late 90s, 2000s players like an Eric Brewer there. So that would have been something that I really wish they would have done. And if they end up having another alumni game in the next year or two, or however long they decide to put the Oilers back in one, I really hope that they do that next time.
Yeah, I do too. I thought that was a huge disappointment that they didn't do it. And I can't speak to necessarily the reasons why they decided not to, but I think that was a big letdown and a kind of a missed opportunity as well.
It would have just made the whole weekend. I mean, if you would have had the alumni game on the Saturday afternoon and then the regular season game on the Sunday afternoon, it just would have worked out great. And maybe even if you want to expand it, I don't know if the NHL would be willing to allow this, but if they would have been, let's say, make it a full weekend of Battle of Alberta, have the Oil Kings versus the Hitmen on the Friday night, and then have, 3 games in 3 days there. I just think they could have turned it into an even bigger event that it ended up being.
Yeah, I thought they could have done something with, like, say, with the alumni game, maybe paired it up with, as you mentioned, a WHL game, or there's also a tremendous rivalry between University of Calgary and University of Alberta hockey teams.
For sure.
Which that they'd have to work obviously with Canada West to align those schedules, which would be probably pretty difficult, but that'd be pretty cool to see out there too. But anyway, but yeah, I thought they could have done it like the day before, and that would have, and maybe had set it at a more for it was. Having gone to the game, how expensive those ticket prices were. I think if you could have done something the previous day to make it a little bit more affordable for people who might not have been able to afford to get into the big game on the Sunday, I thought that would have been really cool. And you could have done something too where you make packs available too, where people want to get something to for both games, and you get tickets for both games. But this would have been
Right.
been something else. Yeah, so I was kind of surprised that didn't happen. And I'm with you whenever you others host a game like this again, or are involved in a game like this again. With say somebody else is hosting, I sure hope we do get to see an alumni team.
For sure. And just before we move on from this, if you could pick one opponent and venue for the Oilers to play in their next alumni or next outdoor game or stadium series game, whichever you want to call it, who would you have them play and where would it be?
That's a great question. So it's obviously not going to be in Edmonton.
Yeah, just to kind of make it more fun to pick like a different spot. I have one in mind that I'll tell you after.
It'd be kind of cool. This will be going way out there. I think I'm a big Toronto Blue Jays fan. I think
are you
it'd be
going to steal my idea?
Play the Leafs in Rogers Center.
I was literally about to say that. That is exactly that was exactly what that was the team I wanted them to play and the venue. I said put it in Rogers Center, have it there, 52,000 fans, pack the place. I just think it would be a great atmosphere. Oilers versus Leafs, McDavid versus Matthews. I can't think of a better one that they could do than that.
No, I think that would be, just the hype and the excitement and two incredibly passionate fan bases, and obviously, just tremendously skilled players on either side. And
there's also a bunch of GTA kids on the Oilers, most notably, of course, McDavid, playing in his hometown against the Leafs. I don't think that other than another one against the Flames that they could draw up a better opponent and place to play the game than that.
No, and I think given I think that's something too that the NHL would probably like to do with just given all the superstars.
Oh yeah, I mean you could market it so well with McDavid versus Matthews alone, but the fact that both teams are very strong teams and that they don't get to play each other that often, only 2 times a year. Of course, we're going to see these teams match up tomorrow night at Rogers Place, but it would be a great to see. I think these teams, you could make it a national game, do it on Hockey Night in Canada even. It would be a pretty exciting thing for hockey fans in general to see, I think, even if you weren't a fan of one of the two teams.
Yeah, and I think part of the charm of these games to some people is the outdoor aspect, and I think that was kind of novel at first, but I mean we've seen a lot of that now. I actually wouldn't mind seeing it I think it would be more unique now to see, like, I've actually seen a lot of games played outdoors in a stadium, but how many games have we seen played in an indoor stadium? that
Not
would be a
many.
whole other different trip. So
Like they did it in Vancouver back in 2014. I do think the fact that playing it outside makes it a little more special. But you're right. Most of the games have been outside, and maybe this is more of a regional event. Like I don't know how much, two teams like say Philadelphia and New York playing has to Western Canada, or how much the Oilers and Flames playing has to the other side of the United States. But uh, just in general, these games are special, even if some people think they're overdone. The local community that gets to have it in their city, I think, really appreciates it. But yeah, the more star power you can get in it, the better. And I look at the Chicago Blackhawks, during their dominant years, of course, Chicago being a big city too, they seem to play in an outdoor game almost every year. And what an opportunity now with Connor McDavid. I would be putting him in at least one outdoor game every season. This is the second one he's played in now, and maybe the fact that he plays in a Canadian market makes it a little less chance of that happening. But still, I would think that that's something, if the NHL really wanted to grow the game and make sure that they advertise their biggest star in the U.S., that they would try and get him in one of these as much as possible.
yeah, couldn't agree with you more.
All right, let's talk about Saturday night's game now. And after equaling the franchise record for the second time in less than 12 months, the Oilers look to make history at the Bell Center. They were playing the most legendary team in NHL history on Hockey Night in Canada, and the game also landed on Connor McDavid's 27th birthday. And fittingly, after getting booed by the fans in Montreal for most of the night, McDavid set up the game-winning goal in overtime to not only secure the first 10-game winning streak in franchise history, but also pass Glenn Anderson for fourth on the Oilers' all-time points list with 907. Brian, other than McDavid scoring the goal himself, I'm not sure that anyone could have scripted a better ending to that hockey game.
No, that whole game was awesome. I mean, for a 2-1 score, and only 2 goals scored in regulation. I mean, there were so many great chances and just great action on both the ice. I thought it was hilarious with the Montreal fans booing McDavid, and like they were just really getting, what an atmosphere, man. It was just,
Yeah.
and then you're right, like the Oilers winning it with Bouchard scoring on one of his patented bombs there at the end. Just fun. Everything about that game was fun, and of course, if you're an Oilers fan, you got to be happy with how it ended.
Oh, without a doubt. And I mean, they gave up that one early, but the Oilers really outchanced the Habs for most of the night. And if it wasn't for Sam Montembeault in net,
Yeah,
I
he
think
had a
that
whale of a
game.
game.
Yeah, I mean, the Oilers had over 40 shots. That game could have easily been 4-1.
Yeah, I think over the shots, well, I think they had 21 or 22 in the third alone.
They finished
Edmonton
with
did.
41 shots, but yeah, I mean, you'd like to think that they're going to put that one away with how many chances they were getting, but they just couldn't seem to sneak one by. And credit to the Habs, they're going up against a pretty potent offensive team, and they were able to shut them down. But Montembeault has had a pretty solid year. I mean, we've even heard his name mentioned in potential trade rumors to the Oilers, even though he signed that 3-year extension with the Habs about a month ago. But still, whenever he's been shown in highlights, I've followed, and it looks like he's been having a pretty strong year. We've seen him. I think he stood on his head against the Rangers recently and locked down a win there. So you can see that he can go up against these top teams and give his team a fighting chance.
Yeah, no, I did. I just thought everything about that game was great, and especially like that's about as fun as a 2-1 game could be.
Yeah, I mean, without a doubt. And, while the Oilers failed to put the game away with 3 power play opportunities in the third period, they got that 4-on-3 advantage in overtime. And you just had the feeling that they were finally going to break through and convert it, didn't you?
Yeah, it was Louis DeBrusque on the broadcast, right? I don't know if you caught that, but when they got the power play at the end of regulation, he was referring back to a conversation he'd had with Glenn Goldson earlier in the day, saying that the power play's been struggling during this, the last several games, but I think when the time comes and they need that goal, they're going to deliver, and sure enough, they did. So I thought that was pretty cool. Yeah, I mean it's funny, and one of the things, well, there's a number of things that impressed me about this win streak, and But the overarching theme to it is that the Oilers are winning in ways they haven't really won before, and they're the things that they would have relied on to succeed before, they haven't necessarily needed to go on this win streak. And one of those things is the power play. And it's crazy to think that, the power play only produced 5 goals over this streak.
Weren't they something like 4 for 30 coming into the game?
Yeah, 4 for 29 coming into the game. They went 1 for 5. Like 6 games of these 10 games, they didn't even score a power play goal. I mean, this is the kind of stuff like if you go back, say, a year ago, and I would have just shown you that stat and said in a 10-game stretch, the Oilers have gone 4 for 29 on the power play, you probably would have thought, oh boy, well, we'd be lucky to be 500 over this stretch, right? But
I think the Oilers set a franchise record last year for most consecutive games with a power play goal scored.
They did, and that's and they needed
which
that
makes sense because
right?
they had the best power play in NHL history last year. So
yeah, but I mean they needed that to that 9-game win the 9-game win streak last year, and like you were mentioning, the incredible run at the end of the season. I mean, the power play was a big part of that. I think it's very encouraging to see that they can have such incredible success without the power play having to step up and bail them out every night. And when the time came to deliver in the biggest moment with the record on the line, the power play clicked.
Yeah, exactly. And I was wondering if McDavid was going to be able to keep his point streak going, and I think, like I said, it ties in so nicely that he has his 10-game point streak, and the Habs the Oilers got their 10-game win streak against the Habs, and it's also his 14th double-digit point streak in NHL or in his career, which is the third most in NHL history, behind only Wayne Gretzky and Mario Lemieux. I believe he tied Guy Lafleur with his 14th career 10-game point streak. So a pretty impressive way to cap off that victory.
Yeah, the numbers, there were so many fun stats coming out of that game, and that was definitely one of them.
Yeah, and you just know that when he's in those big moments, that's the type of games that he rises to the occasion. Like, I even think back to last month, there were a couple weak opponents they played, like the Ducks and the Sharks, and he didn't end up having a big point night. He had 1 assist in both games, and then he plays a team like the Flyers, who are one of the better teams in the Eastern Conference this year, and he puts up 5 points against them. So sometimes I think that just because the Oilers are going up against a bottom feeder doesn't always mean that Connor is going to crush them that night. But when he gets the opportunity to play in an important game, that's sometimes where we see him rise to the occasion and have his best games.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's doing what he needs to do for this team to succeed. And it's funny because I know you and I have talked about a lot about this. We've watched him racking up the points here over the last while, and kind of projected, okay, when might he hit this milestone, and when he might he get with the 900 points, and then when he might pass Anderson. And I think we were looking and kind of thinking like, okay, here's this game against San Jose. Well, that might be good for a 3 or 4 point night, and then Anaheim a 3 or 4 point night, and it's kind of hasn't gone that way. But you know what? That's okay. Him and Draisaitl are probably going to have, especially Draisaitl, have significantly less points than they did last year, really over the last few years. But what's the most important thing? They've won 10 in a row. So whether McDavid has gotten 2 points in those games or 44 points, it's, I think, and I think that's all that matters to them too.
And at the same time, McDavid still has 16 points during this 10-game point streak, which is a 131-point pace over a full 82-game schedule. So his numbers are still elite, even if he hasn't had as many of those, highlight reel type of classic McDavid nights.
No. I mean, he hasn't racked up the points, but I don't think that means that he's playing any less effectively or impacting the game any less. I might argue it's even more. I just think that this team has got it figured out, and maybe it means playing a little less fire wagon hockey than they have in the past, and that might mean a few less goals here and there.
Yeah,
but you look at how they're getting it done right now. They can. When was the last time you could confidently say that this team can win 2-1 games consistently, 3-2 games consistently? I don't know when that is. And you look at this I actually got a stat for you here. They've won. This has tied their current streak. Well, their last 4 games they've won when scoring 3 goals or less, and they have not. That's ties the longest in franchise history. They've
Wow.
never won more than 4 games in a row when in each of those games they scored 3 goals or less. So I mean that shows you that this team is finding new and different ways to win, and it doesn't have to be a shootout every night. And I just find that incredibly encouraging.
Right. And just before I forget, I was going to say during that first 8-game winning streak, that's when McDavid actually really was racking up the huge point totals. And even coming into tonight's game against the Leafs, he has a 13-game home point streak going where he has 30 points. So that's a 2.31 points per game average during that run. But yeah, like you said, it kind of ties into my next question that I had for you as well. I was going to say, their last 3 wins have all been 1-goal games. And do you see this as more of a positive that the Oilers are showing they can consistently win these tight games, or is it concerning to you that the offense hasn't been as effective recently?
Yeah, no, it's to be honest, it's really not concerning me at all because they've delivered when they've had to. I don't think that, I mean, they still been getting lots of shots, creating lots of opportunities. I think they've run into some teams that have, had their goalies have very good nights, and teams that have played good defense and are figuring out ways to kind of minimize the Oilers' chances. And the Oilers have just responded. What I've really loved is how they've stuck with it and haven't, sort of deviated from their game plan and maybe taken risks that could end up, biting them in the end. If you look, I mean, obviously you look in the game in Montreal, they went into the third period trailing, but there was never a sign of panic. And sure enough, they got the tying goal and then were able to close it out in overtime. I'm drawing a blank here. There was another game too where they went in this streak where they went into the third period also trailing.
Well, they did it against back-to-back games against the Devils and the Rangers.
Right. Recently though, just in like the last 2 or 3 games,
they were trailing against Chicago in the first period, but they came back and won that. Right. Red Wings. It was a 0-0 game going into the third period. Wings scored with about 11 minutes to go, I want to say, and then the Oilers ended up tying it and taking the lead before winning it in overtime.
Right. So I think I like the poise and composure this team is showing, and it might not be quite as exciting. You like to see them kind of break out sometimes and maybe take some chances, but this is what it takes to win a Stanley Cup. And This team is, for the first time in the McDavid era, I think you can truly say that they're showing it, and I think it's taken the maturity to get to this point.
And I mean, you look at Chris Knoblauch too, and you've heard Oilers players talk about this in interviews recently, how calm he is behind the bench, and just I think that maybe some of that, composure is rubbing off on the rest of the players too. That like, hey, we're not out of this. And I mean, they had that somewhat with the Jay Woodcroft teams as well too. Like, they were never really out of a game because they were always able to have the offense to outscore their problems and get back into a game if they were trailing. But the fact that they aren't as reliant of needing to load up McDavid and Draisaitl on a line together and, play their huge minutes. You look at some of these games, I mean, perhaps maybe that's even a reason why McDavid didn't have as many big point nights against some of these weaker teams, is because they've been able to roll 4 lines and not have to have his minutes up, right?
That's exactly it. And that kind of comes back around to what I was saying. Like these guys are probably not going to put up points like they have in the last years. And you know what? That's not a bad thing. That just means that this team is figuring out and refining it, and everyone knows their role and exactly what they need to do for this team to be its most successful. And I just find it really encouraging. I just love how they, in Montreal, I think is the perfect example of, really in a nutshell, of what this team is doing. That they got scored on. They gave up a goal under 2 minutes into the game. But there was just no. They never let the Montreal get that second goal. They never kind of deviated from anything that would put themselves at risk. And I really think, and you're right, a lot of it has coincided with when Knobloch has come on, but I think it's just a really a maturity of all these players, kind of getting to this point. We're just starting to see it realize itself now, and maybe it's a couple years later than we would have hoped, but this is it. This is what championship teams look like.
And I know that there are still questions about the Oilers' depth, but I don't remember a time in the McDavid era where they've been able to roll four lines this consistently. And, let's hope that reducing McDavid and Draisaitl's minutes a bit here will pay off come playoff time when they're maybe a little more fresh instead of having to play 23, 24, even 25 minutes a night some games.
And, another thing too, and I just anecdotally speaking, I'm not sure if it's really the case, but I think that we're seeing the lines being thrown in the blender a lot less with Knobloch. Would that be fair to say?
Yeah, and I mean that sort of goes back to my point that I said before about McDavid and Draisaitl too. If as good of a coach as Woodcroft was for the Oilers, and some people still question the change, although I think that this move probably would have been made eventually anyway, because Jeff Jackson was likely going to want to bring in his own guy, and he has a long-standing relationship with Chris Knobloch going back to when McDavid was still in Erie, and that was Jeff Jackson was his agent at the time. So I could see that was probably going to be a move that happened at some point, but because of the Oilers' terrible start to the season, it sort of just expedited the process. But yeah, we're sort of not seeing them go back to that loading up the nuclear option as quickly. Like if the Oilers ever fell behind 2-0 in a game, you could almost bet that Woodcroft was going to be putting them on a line together, and just so many in-game changes. And let's just hope that by letting these players play together more consistently and let these lines build chemistry, that over the course of a full season, they know that these are going to be their consistent line mates. You get to feel a certain comfortability there. And when the season does get into the most important time, that they're ready for it, and that they won't be, seeing any like drastic line changes come playoff time or, as they go deeper on a run.
Yeah, and I honestly think we're already starting to see the benefits of that consistency already. So you can imagine, what it's going to look like 43 games from now when the playoffs start.
Exactly. And Brian, when you look at the Oilers' upcoming schedule, how long do you think they can keep this winning streak going?
I wouldn't be surprised if this goes like, this is going to sound crazy, another 5 or 6 games. Like, I'm honestly, like, with the way this team is playing right now, there's not a time when I look at the opponent or the given on any given night and be like, yeah, the Oilers can't win this game. I honestly am thinking like every night that they're going to win. Like that's just how this team feels, and they're not. Eventually, this is going to end, and it may be against the Leafs, or maybe another 2 weeks yet. But
their next 2 games are their 2 toughest games of the month.
Yeah, who's refresh my memory? Who's after the Leafs?
So they've got Seattle after the Leafs, and even though Seattle is behind the Oilers in the standings, they're 9-0-1 in their last 10 games, and have sort of, when people thought they were dead in the water, have really emerged as a team that's going to be fighting for a wild card spot again. And so if they get by the Leafs, then I'm starting to feel pretty confident that they're going to run the table in January. Because, like we said, Seattle will be a tougher opponent, but you're still on home ice. You have last change. The Oilers do normally beat the Kraken over the past 2 years. I think they've only, I guess since they came into the league, I think the Kraken have only beat them twice. They beat them once in Seattle, and then last year the Oilers had a lead and blew it on home against the Kraken one game right around this time last January. So, but normally it's a team that the Oilers have been able to handle. So, and then if they get by that game, Hockey Night in Canada at the Saddle Dome this Saturday. It's the 4th straight Hockey Night in Canada game that the Oilers have played. They've won the past 3 in LA, against Ottawa, and then in Montreal. And it also gives them a chance to break the franchise record for longest road winning streak, which they also tied against the Habs on Saturday. So that's some added incentive to go into your biggest rival's building and break another franchise winning streak. So I think if they do get by Toronto and Seattle, then they'll be even extra motivated to keep it rolling in Calgary.
Yeah, the Seattle game is one that I'm kind of excited to see too, because I mean they've been playing some amazing hockey lately. I know they lost on Monday, I think, which brought their streak to an end. But I mean they're red hot too, and they're pushing to get in that wild card mix as well. So yeah, but honestly, anytime the Oilers go on the ice right now, I think they're going to win.
For sure. And then next week they'll have Columbus, who's at the bottom of the league, Chicago, who are also at the bottom and without Bedard, and then Nashville, who are in the wild card mix, but it's a team that the Oilers have historically done very well against. So, I mean, yeah, there is a real possibility that the Oilers could go 12-0 this month, and that's going to be another stat that we might have to look up. You're obviously really good at finding these out. If the Oilers have ever swept a month before. So you'll have to maybe see if you could track that out. I guess we did look up that 12-0-3 start. I'd have to see if any of the ties were in there, but maybe October '84 was the only other time it was done.
If it starts getting close, I will start doing the digging.
Okay. Yeah, I don't want to start your research too soon here.
Yeah, I know. But we got a ways to go yet, but yeah, if we get to like the 25th and they're still undefeated, then absolutely I'll start breaking open the old record books and dusting them off and see what we can find.
For sure, and it's going to be an intense atmosphere against the Leafs tomorrow night. So I mean that's one that they get fired up for. I'm glad Edmonton was able to win that game against the Leafs last season when they came to town, and it was I remember Klim Kostin scoring a big goal that game too, and McDavid. I think that was the game when he had his 5th straight multi-goal game, which was one short of the NHL record for most consecutive multi-goal games that was set like 101 years ago or something like that. It went back to like 1921. So it would have been cool to see him get that next one. I was actually at that game for our heavy hockey showdown we had in Edmonton. It was against the Jets. He ended up with 3 assists though, so still a pretty good night for McDavid.
Yeah, well, he's historically, I think he's done pretty good against the Leafs, hasn't he?
Yeah, I mean, he had a 5-point game against them as a rookie back in 2016.
I seem to remember like during the pandemic year when they play like 3 in a row against each other or whatever, like he had some big nights against the Leafs.
Yeah, I mean he's scored a couple memorable end-to-end goals against them for sure. Like obviously it's the Leafs have the edge head-to-head in the Matthews McDavid sort of era, but the ones that the Oilers have won have been pretty memorable victories for sure.
Yeah, no, it's always when those two teams get together, and the two fan bases get together too. It's always a lot of fun, and the game tonight is going to be something to be excited about.
And thanks to the Oilers' 10-game winning streak, as well as the Vegas Golden Knights and the Los Angeles Kings dropping below 500 in their last 10 games, the Oilers are now within striking distance of a top 3 spot in the Pacific Division. Brian, do you think Edmonton can still track down one of or both of Vegas and LA and secure home ice in the first round of the playoffs for the 5th consecutive season?
I do think they will track down both of them. I do. And it's crazy to think this. I mean, what was it? The gap was, I think,
it was massive at one point. Like, I mean,
it was double digits, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, even after the Oilers' 8-game winning streak, they still weren't even in a wild card spot. They were, I mean, I think by points percentage they were, but in terms of actual standings points, it wasn't enough to even, like you said, be within 10 points of them. So the fact that now I believe Vegas is something like 11-14 in their last 25 games after that unbelievable start to the year. In LA, they had a 6 or 7 game losing streak. I think they finally won last night to snap that. But now you look at it, okay, the Oilers are 3 points behind the Kings with a game in hand. So, I mean, even with a win today, you're still only 1 point behind them with half a season to go. So that's up in the air. And then Vegas, the Oilers have 5 games in hand on them and are 8 points behind. So if they were to win 4 of their next 5 games, that they would tie Vegas. So realistically, they're right there with the two of them. And the Oilers do have a lighter schedule through the second half of the season. I put out a tweet about a week and a half ago that the Oilers had the 4th hardest schedule in the league to that point in the season, and they have the third easiest schedule the rest of the way. So there's a good chance that they could still catch one of these teams. And, I think that at the start of the year, we were all thinking at least second in the division and, perhaps the first division title in more than 30 years. But after that terrible start, Oil Country had sort of just accepted that if we get in, it's going to be in a wild card spot. But that's no longer the case. They are firmly setting their goals on getting a top 3 spot. And I'm with you. I don't think that it's out of the question that they could still get home ice. And obviously, if you're going up against a team like LA or Vegas, who both play the Oilers tough, even though the Oilers have had the advantage against LA the past 2 years, and ultimately bowed out to the Golden Knights this year, having that extra home game and last change really would make a big difference in a series like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's kind of, as you mentioned, it's kind of borne itself out there the last couple of years against LA. But yeah, no, I absolutely think they're going to catch LA. I don't even think there's that I think they could be ahead of LA by the end of the week, and LA might not even pass the Oilers the rest of the way. Like I think they might be. LA had such a tremendous start, and they had that incredible road win streak, but I think they've really come back down to earth. They might fade out of the playoff picture altogether because, I mean, you know what? Calgary's playing pretty good lately. Like we mentioned, Seattle's coming on. Like there could be some other teams that are pushing to get into the wild card next year too. And we could just see LA fall out of the playoff picture entirely. And you mentioned, 5 games in hand on Vegas. Vegas 11-14 their last 25. I mean, that's no small stretch, right?
No.
That's that. It's not like they've gone on a, if you think about
Jack
how
Eichel's
much
on IR too. I mean, you never want to hope for injuries, and I would never cheer for injuries for anyone, but that is an impact. And Mark Stone has had issues with his back too, so you never know if they're going to be sitting some more guys to sort of rest for the playoffs as we've seen them do in past years. So yeah, it's totally possible that they could catch, like I said, one of, if not both of them. I think they will. I think they are going to finish second, and that would set up probably a first round Edmonton Vegas series, which would be a pretty intense way to start the playoffs, going against the defending Stanley Cup champions, and nothing that they're not used to, though. They've lost to the eventual champions the past 2 years, and if they did get past them, that would set up an even more epic second round against Vancouver, considering that they lost the first 3 games against them this year, and having a chance to get some revenge and also play the Canucks in the first round, or in the playoffs, I should say, for the first time since 1992 would be pretty cool to see.
Vancouver's an interesting one too, because I mean they're obviously this is a young team that's kind of not really been in this position before. They've just kind of accelerated to the top of the pack this year, and I am going to be curious to see how they fare in the playoffs. Is that maybe relative inexperience going to, it depends on who they end up drawing. Let's say they do hang on and get the number 1 seed. I mean, they could end up going up against a more experienced LA team in the 1-8 matchup.
Yeah, and I wouldn't be surprised if LA won that series.
Right. St. Louis is kind of floating around in there. I wouldn't necessarily even think that it would be. I would not be that confident that Vancouver would be the team that the Oilers would face in the second round if we got to that point. But that's kind of there's a lot of good teams out there, and I just think in the other division, Winnipeg, Dallas. How much fun would it be if the Oilers could at some point in time here lock up with Winnipeg with how good the Jets team is, and wouldn't that be an incredible Western Conference final?
Well, a good friend of mine is a big Winnipeg Jets fan, and we've kind of talked about that possibility of them meeting in the Western Conference final, and I believe it would be the first time that 2 Canadian clubs have faced each other in a conference final since 1994, when the Leafs played the Canucks.
I think you're right. Yeah, you're absolutely right. I'm pretty sure I can't think of any other time. No, you're...
Because there's only been so many Canadian teams that have made the final since 94. I mean, you've got the Flames.
Even just getting to the conference finals for a Canadian team has been a big accomplishment.
It has. To have a all Canadian matchup. I mean, it would be such an intense environment too, and awesome for fans to see, two former WHA teams. I know that these Winnipeg Jets aren't technically the incarnation from the WHA, but still, just to see the Oilers and Jets go at it would be an awesome Western Conference final, and leading into one of them, having a chance to book their ticket to the Stanley Cup final makes it even more exciting.
Well, imagine another potential matchup too for the conference final could be Edmonton Dallas.
Yeah, which, we almost got that rematch in 2022 when Dallas was playing Calgary, and I was really hoping that Dallas would pull through in that final game in overtime, because I was hoping that we would get another shot at revenge for 20 years earlier. But obviously it worked out even better than we could have imagined, because the Oilers ended up playing the Flames and beating their biggest rival in such an epic fashion that I don't think anyone would want to trade those memories, even for a win over Dallas.
I remember a lot of people were cheering for Dallas at the time, and I was saying, like, no way, I want the Battle of Alberta.
You wanted it, yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
but
it's
I
funny
mean, now, we've had the Battle of Alberta now, and it's been I guess the last time it'll be coming up on 21 years. 21 years, right? This spring,
since the Oilers and Dallas last played in the playoffs, yeah.
Yeah, so I think we're due.
And I mean, they played each other in 6 out of 7 years, before that. So
So
you almost just knew that the Oilers and Stars were going to be playing in the playoffs every year. And other than that 03, well, I guess also they got swept one year, I think in either 99 or 2000. But a lot of those years, even though Dallas was by far the better team on paper, the Oilers really gave them all they could handle.
Oh yeah, no, I mean it's most of the games were 1-goal games and would come down right to the end, and yeah, that's one of the reasons that I love those Oilers teams so much, is just like they were in over their heads, but man, they didn't play like it.
Yeah, that was a really likable team, and they, Craig McTavish got every ounce of ability out of that roster that he could, working on a shoestring budget. And, even talking about that 0-1 team that went on the 9-game winning streak, I think they ended up finishing 6th in the Western Conference that year.
Yes.
Yeah. So, I mean, to think that Oilers team with, a really strong first line of Waite, Guerin, and Smith, but lines 2 through 4, really didn't match up against the true contenders in the Western Conference. The fact that they were able to finish 6th, that I think really speaks to, how well that team came together at the most important time, and, pulled off that 9-game winning streak to not only make it into the playoffs, but not just be the 8th seed either.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny, like if Dallas had finished first that year, the Oilers probably would have found a way to finish 8th.
Yeah, it just seemed whatever place they were getting, it was always going to line up. All right, I want to go back to McDavid now. We already talked about how he passed Glenn Anderson for the 4th most points in Oilers history over the weekend. However, McDavid also has the 4th most points in NHL history by a player before turning 27 with 906. He trails only Wayne Gretzky with 1,606, Mario Lemieux with 1,014, and Dale Hawerchuk with 929. And if not for games lost to injury and the pandemic, McDavid would likely have over 1,000 career points by now. In your opinion, which of these two feats is more impressive? Ranking 4th in points for a franchise with as much talent as the Oilers have had in their history, just 9 years into his career, or being the only player in NHL history who played entirely in the 21st century with 900 points before turning 27?
Oh, it's the latter for sure. I think like he's doing things that, you and I talked about this before, but like you look at any of the great accomplishments that he has, you throw up these lists and you look at all the names on them, and they're all from the 80s, right? They're all from this other era, the highest scoring era in NHL history. And McDavid has got himself in this company has put himself in company with these guys playing in an entirely different era. And certainly scoring has kind of gone up a little bit from maybe when it really platooned in like the late 90s, early 2000s, but it's still nothing like it was in the 80s. So to me, that's most impressive. I mean, he's putting up and this is a whole other topic, but I've often wondered too what it would be like. How many points would Gretzky put up if he was playing in this era? How many points would McDavid put up if he was playing in that era?
You have to look at the conditions of the league too, right? So
yeah,
if Gretzky's playing today, he has modern equipment, modern, a composite stick, a different eating and nutrition regimen, right? Like it's not the 4 hot dogs and a Diet Coke before the game that he was accustomed to having back in the 1980s and 1990s. But there's so many different things about today's players. The sports science is better. The information and equipment is so much better. Just the training. I think that if you put McDavid back into the 80s, you also have to remember that the pro style coaching that he's been receiving since probably age 10 also isn't there. So it's really hard to compare players from separate eras. You almost have to just compare them to their own era to really get a proper read. And I know they've done era adjusted stats to try and like even it out, but realistically, the fact that McDavid is at 900 points before his 27th birthday, and he's ahead of some other names on the list like Steve Yzerman, Bobby Orr, who else was on here? I'm just going to pull that up again right now. Brian Trottier, Jaromir Jagr, Denny Savard. I mean, he even got to 900 points, 75 games faster than Sidney Crosby, who played in a similar era to McDavid. That just kind of shows you how dominant he's been over these, first 9 years of his NHL career.
Yeah, it's been remarkable. Like I say, like you look at all these lists, and it's just like it's all these guys from the 80s, and then there's McDavid in there, and it's pretty cool. I think that speaks to just how incredible he is, that he's so far above what anybody else in this time, this current era is doing. That really speaks to his greatness.
Yeah, and to think that Oilers fans were lucky enough to watch Wayne Gretzky in the 1980s and now Connor McDavid in the 2020s. For fans of a certain vintage who were able to watch both of them, they've been pretty blessed in their lifetime.
And then there's those of us who have been blessed to watch Doug Wade and Connor McDavid.
Yeah, exactly.
And I'm quite happy with that too.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, and I'm a little bit younger than you, but still, those late 90s, early 2000s teams were really my sort of introduction to hockey. And I mean, when you are anywhere from, let's say, 7 years old to 13 years old, those teams that I watched at that time, it really, left an impression on me and just showed me like that's what Oilers hockey is, battling it out, working so hard and, scratching and clawing for everything you have. We didn't know the teams of the 1980s. And, as I learned more about them, as I got older and became a big fan of that era of hockey, especially, we're not going to ever see that again. But the fact that last year the Oilers scored 325 goals and they have two players that are consistently at the top of the scoring race, it's been a really enjoyable run this last 5, 6 years, 7 years of seeing all the points that McDavid and Draisaitl and company have put up. It's not something that I had ever seen before, and probably the closest that anyone has seen since those dynastic teams back in the 1980s.
Yeah, no, they've it's not hyperbole to say they're generational talents.
Yeah, without a doubt. And Brian, as we know, McDavid always takes his game up a few notches down the stretch drive. So just to wrap up the McDavid conversation, I have two questions for you. He currently has 907 career NHL points. He would need 93 points in the final 43 games to hit the 1,000 point mark this season. Do you think McDavid will reach 1,000 points before the 23-24 campaign is over? And he also trails Nikita Kucherov by 15 points in the scoring race with 4 games in hand. Do you think McDavid will catch Kucherov and win his 6th Art Ross Trophy as scoring champion?
Well, the first one, I don't think he's going to get to 1,000 before the end of this season. I mean, that would just take like an incredible. What's he needs 93 points in 43 games, so he'll be averaging about like 2.2 per.
2.16.
I can't see that. I think he's going to finish. I talked about this a bit before, but I think he's probably going to finish with fewer points than what he has put up the last couple seasons, and that's just because of that's kind of how this team is right now, and it's not a bad thing, and it's not even a criticism of him. I just think that's how it's going to turn out. So, as far as him though catching the scoring or taking over the scoring lead, that one. How many games in hand does he have? 5?
4 games in hand, and he's 15 points back. So, at his current pace, if you think about what he has right now, he has. Let me bring this up. 57 points in 37 games, which is a 126 point pace. So if he put up, let's say 6 points, 7 points in those next 4 games, now he's cut the deficit down to about, let's say, 8 points with an even amount of games with Kucherov. In the final 40 games of the season, can he make up those 8 points?
Yeah, I think he could. I mean, I think probably he's gonna finish. Just kind of running the numbers through my skull here right now. I'd probably right around 120 points, if not more. Then that, I mean, I guess, which is probably what's Kucherov on pace for right now?
I will pull up his numbers and tell you in 1 second. So he has a 1.67 points per game average, and I don't think he's missed any games. So that would
he's actually going to be over 130.
He's on pace for 137.
Yeah. Wow.
Now Connor missed 2 games, right? So
yeah, that's a lot. He's gonna.
So yeah, McDavid's on pace for 123 123 in 80 games. But I honestly believe he's going to hit 130 this year again, Brian. Like, we know that coming into February, March, April is when he really picks up his game and puts up his most points. If you go back and look year over year, the last 25 games of the season, he's usually hovering around just under 2 points a game. And I figure that given how important this time of year is, that he is going to pick it up, and he'll probably come out of this like even last year. Do you remember there was in the middle of the season there was a 20 game stretch, I think, where he had 21 points, which is elite for most players, but down for McDavid's incredibly high standards. And then he just went on a tear and ended up finishing the season with 153 points. Now, I don't think he's going to put up 150 points again this year, but could he still get 130? I definitely think that's possible. And perhaps Kucherov slows down a bit too. So it wouldn't surprise me at all. And in fact, I'm banking on him not only winning his 6th Art Ross overall, but his 4th straight, which would make him the first player in over 2 decades to win 4 straight Art Ross trophies since Jaromir Jagr from 1997-98 through 2000-2001.
Yeah, for sure, it could definitely happen. I think a big part of it too will be what Kucherov does, right? I mean, if it'll be tough if Kucherov continues to score at this pace.
Yeah.
We'll see if he can maintain this for another 40 games.
That is a good point. All right. We saw Evander Kane skating alongside Leon Draisaitl and Warren Foegele at practice today. Kane has been playing on the third line for the last few weeks, but he could be back in the top 6 tomorrow night against the Toronto Maple Leafs. He has 14 goals on the year, but just 2 in his last 13 games. Brian, where do you think the best spot is to play Kane in the lineup right now, and will that change come playoff time?
Well, right now, honestly, I'm not even, I don't fix what ain't broke, right? I mean, so if it were me, I would just continue to roll the lines as we've been rolling them over the last 10 games. But I think it's important to get him going, because I think, and we've seen this in the playoffs the last couple of years, how crucial he is to this team's success. He's the kind of guy that I think his importance is elevated. The type of player that he is, his importance is elevated come playoff time. Yeah. And I wonder if that's what part of what this is just to try and get him going, because they know that when the crunch time comes, that he is going to play a big role in deciding how far this team goes.
No, that's a good point. And I mean, like we said, he still is on pace for almost a 30-goal season. I would expect that if he gets to play with Draisaitl on a more consistent basis, he could get over 30. But really, to be a top point producer on this Oilers team, you have to be a regular part of the Oilers power play unit. And because he only gets maybe 30 seconds of power play time at the end of a power play when the big guys come off, it's hard to be a consistent point producer at that point, because like you really need to be out there with McDavid and Draisaitl, Bouchard, Nugent Hopkins creating that offense. And with Zach Hyman, firmly taking that net front role, I don't see Kane really getting a chance to move in there unless there was an injury. So it'll be tough for him to put up maybe the point totals that he's capable of if he was on another team, or if the Oilers were missing one of their top players. But like you said, he's a player that you're going to need come playoff time. There is that intimidation factor there, and he's a big moment player too, right? I think back to last year against LA, down 4-3 in Game 6. He scores that big clutch goal to send them to overtime that they eventually won. So I would bank on Kane still playing higher in the lineup than he has been recently when they get into the most important part of the year.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, he's had some huge goals in the last couple playoffs, actually. And so I think that he's a guy they're going to need in April and May, and, well, maybe June.
Yeah, let's hope they're still going in June. All right, UFA winger Corey Perry's name has been linked to the Oilers by a couple insiders recently. Daily Faceoff's Frank Saravelli called the Oilers an authentic candidate to sign Perry, and now TSN's Chris Johnston says the Oilers would make sense for Perry as well. Brian, Perry has been among the most disliked players by Oilers fans for a long time, but he could soon be joining the Orange and Blue. At age 38, do you think Perry could still help this team?
Yeah, oh, for sure. I mean, if we're just talking about on ice stuff, I mean, he was actually having a great start to this season. I think he's
on pace for almost 20 goals.
Yeah, he looks great for 38, and he can. The stuff that he brings is like, it's the stuff that I don't think the tools that he has can help any team. There's no team that's going to turn down that kind of player. And he's, we've seen examples of it against the Oilers. How
he's a player you hate to play against, but probably would like on your team.
Yeah, exactly. He's kind of Claude Lemieux like in that sense. And Claude Lemieux was like a team that, or a player that every team he went to had incredible success in the playoffs. He's that kind of guy. There's a lot of
do you think going to 3 straight Stanley Cup finals recently also is something that would benefit the Oilers, that experience? I mean, he did win a cup early in his career in 2007, but just, going on a few deep playoff runs, could that rub off on some of the guys as well?
Yeah, I would think so. And I can't remember where I heard this. It was I can't remember if it was on Sportsnet, or might have been on a radio or something. But there was a conversation in the last week I heard about, how important is it for the Oilers to have that Stanley Cup experience? Because right now there's no one on this team who has won a Stanley Cup, and I'm not sure. Is there anyone who's even played in the final?
Oh, I'm just trying to rack my head right now. Brett Kulak with the Montreal Canadiens.
Okay, right, yeah. So, and how is that an overrated thing? Is that whole thing about experience and having a guy or two who's been there and won that?
Well, the Oilers have been on 2 relatively deep playoff runs the last 2 years. I mean, third round in 2022, second round last year. So there is playoff experience there, but there isn't like a long track record of winning that this group has. Like when you look at Vegas's lineup, I mean, 90% of their team has won a Stanley Cup before. So they've been there. You know, you look at Colorado, they've lost some guys from their cup team, but probably I would say 3/4 of their lineup is still a carryover from that Stanley Cup championship team. So Tampa Bay, even though they're a little further down the standings now, a dangerous team come playoff time because they've won a lot before. The Oilers don't have that yet. I do feel like if they get in and they get rolling the way that they can, then they could go all the way. And if the Oilers do get to the final, I just feel like the first time McDavid and Draisaitl play in a Stanley Cup final, they're not going to miss.
I'll be fascinated to see how they would perform in that environment. Yeah, that's it would be interesting to see. I'd be curious, what the stats are like if you look at teams that win the Stanley Cup. How many players on their roster had previously won a Stanley Cup prior to that? And just thinking back,
that's a deep dive that you might have to research later in the season as well. But
I think like even if we think back to say the Oilers' very first Stanley Cup championship team in '80. Now, of course, in '84, most of them would have played in '83. Yeah. The team that got there in '83, I don't know if anyone on that roster had previously been to the Stanley Cup. It'll be. I mean, some guys, like when they get there, they just take to it right away. I mean, I think the Penguins were with Crosby and Malkin were, they were dynamite performers in the Stanley Cup right away, and they didn't. Colorado as well. So you could be right. I mean, it could be it's the biggest stage, and when McDavid and Draisaitl hopefully do get there, they might take over.
Yeah, I wouldn't bet against it. And the other thing is with Perry. 20 years ago, he almost became an Oiler. There was that trade in December 2003 where Mike Comrie ended up going to the Philadelphia Flyers, but they had a trade in place with the Anaheim Ducks until, once again, the cash-strapped Oilers had Kevin Lowe, who reportedly was asking for Mike Comrie to pay back his bonus.
I don't know if it's even reported. I think it's pretty much been settled that is what happened, but
which makes sense for the team at the time. But I mean, can you imagine how different history goes if Corey Perry ends up joining the Oilers midway through the 2003-2004 season? Do they end up winning that cup in 2006 with him as a rookie, or how different does the decade of darkness play out? I try not to dwell on anything that happened before the McDavid lottery, though, because I feel like every decision, good or bad, led to the Oilers landing McDavid in that draft. So I've let all of that go. But yeah, you can see that there were some missed opportunities where they could have, or they just could have drafted Perry in 2003 when they had the chance and picked Marc-Antoine Pouliot instead.
Yes, that probably would have been the easiest way to
two opportunities to do it, right? So
yeah.
It's so, once again, like I said, I've let it all go, but it was frustrating at the time when you look back that almost every NHL team got a substantial player from that 2003 draft, and the Oilers were one of the only ones that didn't.
Yeah, they were. I think they've done a pretty good job drafting recently, but
I'll take getting the best player from the 2014 and 2015 draft respectively. That helps a lot.
But I mean, the Oilers for a good chunk of their first 25 years had I would probably say a pretty dubious draft record, especially in the 80s anyway. And then you look at examples like the 2003 year, but it's you're right. I mean, everything leads to one place, and who knows how differently things turn out if that happens. So
yeah,
here we are.
And as I mentioned, Perry probably is one of the 5 most disliked players by Oilers fans in the league right now, I would guess. If I was able to take a poll of it, I think he would still be at the top, even though the rivalry that he had with the Ducks, hasn't been there for several years now. But just there are long-standing memories there, throughout the 2010s, and even going back to those, I guess that 2006 series when he first was breaking in with Anaheim in the playoffs against Edmonton. But can you think of another time where a player who was as disliked by the fan base ended up joining the Oilers?
I can't.
I mean, Evander Kane wasn't, a player who was loved by any means. I don't know if he was at the top of the most disliked players.
Yeah, well, no,
but
actually, that's a good one. Like I put him up there, but that was different. That was kind of like, with a lot of the stuff that he just had going on around him, and there was a lot of skepticism about some of that stuff, and I think that's what. So I think I kind of put him in a different category because people didn't feel that way about him based on of a hockey rivalry, which is what.
Yeah, but that's what I mean. Like a true rivalry, like a player on a rival who Oilers fans had a lot of disdain for, end up coming in and playing for the team. I don't know if I could think of anyone who would be on Perry's level off the top of my head.
No, I can't think of anyone. There's honestly, actually, no one is really coming to mind at all.
And just to piggyback off that question, do you think it would be an instant acceptance by the fan base, or you don't think there would be a gradual period of accepting him and embracing him in Oil Country?
No, I think he would get a big ovation his first time on the ice, and the first time he does something dirty to somebody on the other team, everyone would go crazy.
Finally, he's doing it for us instead of against us.
Yeah, no,
because that something dirty is coming. That's just in his DNA. He can't help himself.
Yes, exactly. No, I think it'll be a love affair.
Yeah, and maybe he is the third line option. I know Bob Stauffer put out, or he said on a Sportsnet broadcast that he thinks the Oilers will add at least one top six forward and one bottom six forward before the deadline. Now, he didn't say how they will add. So if Perry is that bottom six forward, that maybe still means that they will go out and explore the trade market to fill that top six role. A name like Jake Gensel has been tossed out there. I don't know how likely that is. I think Perry's probably a more likely player to come to Edmonton. But I just think the fact that multiple insiders from different organizations have now linked these two together, that there's certainly some smoke there, and I wouldn't be surprised if we see this end up happening.
Perry alone would be a big addition if it's Perry and then another top six player. I mean, my goodness, that's huge.
And my last topic before we move on, this is just kind of a fun one, but you and I are both jersey aficionados, and like to look back at some of our favorite jerseys over the year. We did on a previous episode, and last year the NHL All-Stars did a Miami Vice themed jersey, which was they used a logo, I think, from the 1994 in design of the All-Star game when they played in Sunrise, Florida. This year it's sort of a 90s-ish theme that was designed in part by Justin Bieber, and there's 4 different ones that have come out with sort of the Adidas stripes down the side. I've seen some people say that they look like Doritos jerseys. I've seen others say that they looked like the Power Rangers. There's been various jokes that have been made. What do you think of them in general? I'm guessing because you and I are both 90s pop culture fans that you might be a fan of these ones.
Yeah, Doritos jerseys. That's funny. I can actually see that. I don't know. I liked them when I first saw them. I thought they looked pretty cool. I thought they were a little bit different, but I think they were too out there, too crazy. I thought they seemed to look better on the rack than they did when they were actually being worn. Like I know the Hockey Night Canada panel threw them on when they unveiled them, and they didn't look quite as good being worn as they did when they just showed them. But we'll see what they look like when they're on the ice. But I think they're cool. I think they're something kind of different.
It almost has a cartoonish look. Like the stars on them look like Super Mario World stars to me.
Yeah, I can see that. I think that's kind of fun. I like it. So I from what I could tell, that was not widely embraced. But then again, these All-Star jerseys are generally not widely embraced. It seems to be kind of Yeah, it seems to be kind of still a thing with hockey fans or NHL fans, where it's the more out there it gets, the less they like it.
I think the pink and light green jerseys that they did last year, like I said, with the sort of the 1980s Miami Vice theme, were really cool. And they actually did use the Western and Eastern Conference logos that were on the All-Star jerseys back at that time. So it's very hard to top those ones. I think that anything was going to be sort of viewed as a step down, but they obviously can't use those same ones year after year. We haven't seen consistent All-Star jerseys since probably the 1980s, when the Campbell and Wales Conference wore the same ones several years in a row. Now there's just too much marketing. You have a jersey in a different city, you want to have a new jersey to sell to the fans. So I think those days have gone, are just seeing one standard jersey year over year.
Yeah, I mean, it's part of the fun of it, seeing what kind of design they come up with, and especially if they try to incorporate like the motif that's either, whether it's reflective of like the local region, like you mentioned last year's Miami Vice, or pop culture in the area, or the team itself. So yeah, I mean, it is marketing, and obviously with getting the Beebs to design it is a big part of that too. But it's fun. It's just another kind of cool element to this, and I like kind of what they're doing with All-Star Weekend this year too, taking it to 3 days, and they just kind of like making it into a big event.
The skills competition, should be, interesting too. And it really, that's the one thing that I look forward to the most out of All-Star Weekend, because you're not going to see the best hockey in the game. That's a given. But the fact that they've sort of revamped the super skills event, and that there's only going to be 12 players participating with one winner at the end, and I believe it's a $1 million prize to whoever wins it, and the fact that the league actually consulted with Connor McDavid on putting this thing together, it'd be really cool to see Connor end up winning that thing too, and just sort of in his hometown in Toronto. It would be a pretty cool way for the weekend to wrap up.
I'm looking forward to this new look skills competition, and actually, to just like you said, more than I probably won't even watch the game,
No.
or the games, but the skills competition is something I will make a point to see.
And Brian, just to close out the show tonight, I thought we'd do another trivia, which was something we did the last episode you were on, and you ended up going 10-9 on that one. So just to kind of explain how we did it again, I have a top 10 list here for you, and you're going to attempt to name all the top 10 players on this list correctly before you get 10 incorrect answers. So like I said, last time you had 10 correct, you got all of them with 9 strikes. So you got almost to the end of your strikes. And you didn't use any of your 3 lifelines. So I'll just explain again what the lifelines are. If you're stuck on a guy, you can use one lifeline will tell you all the teams that this player played for. The other one will tell you the jersey number that they wore, or the main jersey number if they wore multiple ones. And the third one will be country that they were born in. So you ready to attempt this?
I am, and if I had 9 strikes last time, I got to beat this time. So we're going for at worst 8 strikes.
So last time when I had you on in October 2022, you did the top 10 point getters in Oilers history. Tonight you are going to name the top 10 in points in the NHL in the 1990s. So we're going from Oilers in the 90s to the entire league for the 90s this time. So I've got the top 50 in front of me here. This goes, of course, from January 1st, 1990 until December 31st, 1999. So being that this era, is one that you grew up watching, no extra pressure, but I know that you'll be familiar with this group probably. So I'll let you take it away.
Well, first I'll go with Jagr.
Coming in at number 2 with 928 points, Jaromir Jagr. Any surprise
Sakic?
there that he's 2?
Yes, I am surprised that he's 2, and that's already got me wondering. Sakic?
Coming in at number 5 with 895 points, Joe Sakic. So 2-0 to start.
I gotta think. Yeah, Gretzky's got to be on there, right?
Well, Brian, coming in at number 1 with 940 points, Wayne Gretzky. And another fact, Gretzky is the only player in NHL history to lead multiple decades in points. Of course, he led the 1980s in points, almost 1,000 points more than the player in second place, but he did finish at the top of the 1990s as well.
That's absolutely crazy because he was obviously still incredible at the beginning of the decade, but I kind of like think that his last few seasons his point production has really slowed down. But I guess that just shows how great he was at the start.
Well, if we think about it, it was probably 8. I think. Yeah, he was at about almost 1900 points at the end of the 80s. I think he was around, because he hit his 1851st point in October of 1989, obviously when he broke the record in Edmonton with the Kings. Yeah. And there were still 2 more months after that. So I think he got his 1900th point in the 90s, actually, once the decade had started. But yeah, still to be at nearly 1,000 points in the 90s, which was almost entirely his 30s. Just also speaks to, his longevity of greatness.
So I've got Gretzky.
You've got Gretzky at 1 with 940 points. Jágr at number 2 with 928 points, only 12 behind Gretzky. And you've got Joe Sakic in 5th with 895 points.
Okay, let's go Steve Yzerman.
Coming in at number 4 with 896 points, 1 ahead of Sakic, Steve Yzerman.
All right. Sticking with guys who played in Detroit, Brett Hall's got to be there.
Coming in at number 6 with 873 points, Brett Hull. So you're 5-0 to start, and you've got 5 of the top 6 off the board.
Okay.
Are you surprised you haven't got 3 yet?
Kinda. This guy's he's not going to be number 3, but Mark Messier.
That's your first miss. Coming in at number 13 with 773, Mark Messier. He missed the list by about 50 points.
Oh, okay. Ron Francis has probably got to be in there. I don't know if he'd be number 3.
Coming in at number 9 with 822 points. Actually, I'm going to correct myself. 9 and 10 are a tie, and the other guy gets the tiebreaker because he has more goals. So technically, coming in at number 10, Ron Francis with 822. So now you're up to 6-1, off to a pretty strong start.
Jeremy Roenick.
Coming in at number 11 with 793 points, Jeremy Roenick. 6-2. Yeah, he finished, what would he have been? 29 points back of Ron Francis, who's in 10th.
So, I got 2 misses now.
Yep, 6-2.
Okay. Mike Modano.
Coming in at number 17 with 734 points, Mike Modano. So 6-3.
I gotta think.
That was your lowest one so far because you've had 11, 13, and 17 now.
Okay, I think this guy might be number 3. Mark Recchi.
Coming in at number 7 with 866 points, Mark Recchi, which takes you up to 7-3. So you've got your 3 lifelines remaining. You could just use the 3 and clean it up, but if you want to try and do it like last time without any lifelines, you can go for that too.
If I start getting in trouble where I where I look like I'm gonna, we'll keep going for.
Are you finding this list harder than the Oilers? Because
Oh yeah,
when it was the Oilers.
I mean, I know the Oilers a lot better than I do the obviously the league as a whole, but
it was tough because there were almost two separate eras of Oilers hockey in the 90s, right?
Yes, yeah.
And trying to determine which of them, like, is a Craig McTavish on the list compared to is a Bill Guerin on the list, right? Like two guys who played at different times, but were they able to crack the top 10? Whereas these players, regardless of whether they got traded or not, were there for basically most of them the whole decade. I mean, you'd really need to play, I'd think 9 out of the 10 years for sure to make this list. Like Yager debuted in 1990. And here he is in number 2 on the list. But I think everyone else.
That's why I've been tempted just to throw out Lemieux, but I'm sure he's probably not in there.
Yeah, because you have to take into account injury, and I'm not going to say whether he is or not, but
yeah.
I mean, you could imagine if he was fully healthy, which he obviously wasn't. That I would think that he would probably be number 1.
I am going to go with Luc Robitaille. Oh, I just have another one too, but let's try Luc Robitaille.
Okay, well, I have to dig onto the list a little bit here. I can tell you he didn't make it.
Okay.
I was trying to scroll to find his name here, but wasn't one of the top 10. Found him. 15th. 752. So, I mean, all your misses have been not too far off the mark. Roenick at 11, Messier at 13, Robitaille 15, Modano 17. So, still 7-4.
I'm going to go with Doug Gilmour.
Coming in at number 12 with 785, Doug Gilmour. So that gets you to 7-5. Have I got
all of 10 through 15?
Or
11 through 15?
Except for 14, yeah.
Okay.
Other than 14 and 16, you've been pretty good for that top 10 to 15 range. 7-5.
So. Of course. Theo Fleury.
Coming in at number 9, tied with Ron Francis for points, but with more goals, Theo Fleury.
So I'm missing 2.
Yep, you're 8-5, and the numbers you are missing are number 3 and number 8.
Number 3.
So you still have 5 strikes. So you're not in imminent danger, but the lifelines may need to be used at some point.
And number 8. Okay, this guy's not going to be number 3, but I think he might be number 8. Brendan Shanahan.
Coming in at number 18 with 724 points, Brendan Shanahan. 8-6.
Okay, I think I'm going to have to use a lifeline here. Yeah, because I want to get less strikes.
Okay.
Fewer strikes than last time, more than I'm concerned about using my lifeline. So let's go to a lifeline. Let's
okay, so you're 8-6 at the moment. So you can have your choice. So for 3 or 8, you have the list of teams they played for, the jersey number they wore for the majority of their career, or the country they were born in. So obviously the list of teams is probably going to be the biggest hint. Jersey number, not as helpful, but more so than the country they're from.
Okay, let's go.
So your most helpful lifeline would be list of teams if you wanted to use that one.
Yeah. This number 3 is really throwing me. Like I can think of like 15 guys who could be number 8, but let's use the list of teams for number 3.
Okay. I will read you his teams in order. Teams that number 3 played for: Detroit Red Wings, St. Louis Blues, Boston Bruins, Washington Capitals, Philadelphia Flyers.
This is Adam Oates, right?
Anaheim Mighty Ducks, Edmonton Oilers, coming in at number 3 with 902 points. Adam Oates.
Yeah.
You got it before I even finished the list.
That's one of those ones where it's like you don't really necessarily think of him, right? But he had some monster seasons there in the early 90s.
I mean, he finished second in the NHL in assists in the 1990s behind Gretzky.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that he's making this list majorly on his assist totals. But I mean, in fairness, I guess so is Wayne, though. Like in the 90s, Gretzky had 238 goals and 702 assists. So that kind of shows you. But that would be typical to the 80s as well. Like he would have had over 1,000 assists in the 80s, but also, equal parts a dominant goal scorer and playmaker, where he was almost primarily a passer at this stage of his career. So you are now 9-6.
Let's
have your
use
one
country
life
here
for
number 8.
He is Canadian.
He's Canadian. Okay, that helps. That eliminates a few Europeans I was thinking of.
And you still have jersey number for him as well if you want. 9-6, looking to improve on his record.
I don't know if that'll make it. I'm not always not that great with jersey numbers, but let's do it.
Now, he did wear multiple numbers throughout his career, but the number that he wore mainly on most of his stops was number 77.
Pierre Turgeon?
Coming in at number 8 with 858 points, Pierre Turgeon.
Oh, okay, all right.
Probably the most, the least one that you would think of to be on this list.
I would never. He was not even. I have so many names rattling around in my head. He was not one of them, and I never thought that because I'm really not that great with numbers. I wouldn't have, but I mean that's such a unique number.
I mean, I'll give you some of the other ones on the list too, because you did get most of the top 20, but Vincent Damphus in 14th.
Okay.
Matt Sundin in 16th. You
obviously had Fedorov's got to be in there, right?
Let me look. You had Shanahan at 18. Alexander McGillney at 19th.
Yeah.
Mario Lemieux at 20th. But once again, best points per game average of the 90s by some margin, like even a lot better than Gretzky in the 90s. So, he, obviously would have been number 1 if healthy. And then number 21, Sergei Fedorov.
Oh, Fedorov 21. Okay.
And then the list goes on. There's some pretty big names in the top 50, but I think maybe the most surprising is Turgeon, a sneaky good player there throughout his prime.
Oh, I would. Yeah, he was. He definitely was, and that's like it. He was very under the radar because I would never. I probably could have rattled off 20 more names and I wouldn't have got him. So.
Do you think it was because he maybe played for Buffalo and the Islanders and then sort of bounced around to like the Habs, Blues, Stars? Like it wasn't like he was in a Stanley Cup situation where he's playing alongside some of the bigger name superstars in the league.
I think part of it is too like there isn't a team that you can identify him with.
That's fair.
He
was a first overall pick.
Yeah, no, that's true. Yeah, most of these guys there's a team that you would identify them with, except for Adam Oates, who also made the rounds. But you think a lot of the other guys like Fleury is a Flame. I guess Brett Hull's got a couple teams you can think of, but he's a Blue. Sakic's Yzerman's a Red Wing. Sakic's an Avalanche. Jagger, Penguins. So a lot of these guys have like distinctive teams. Ron Francis, he obviously had his most success probably in Pittsburgh, but I think of him as like a Hartford Whaler.
That's true.
So yeah. But Pierre
it's hard to say which team I don't even know what he's known for. Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah. So
when you're bouncing around just with teams. Yeah, I mean you got it again. So what was your final 10-6?
10-6. Oh, now I set the bar too high for next time. Now I'm really under pressure.
I'm wondering if I have to switch it up from
10-7 or 10-8, so I would have it be easier to top next time.
Maybe one of these lists you're just going to run the table and go 10-0.
Well, if you may have to keep doing the podcast for like 20 more years for that to happen. But
Well,
yes, we
I'll
can all
try and
dream.
stay in your wheelhouse. I mean, I know that you're a smart hockey fan for any era, but I think that the '90s is probably one that you and I both appreciate a lot, and that you'd have a good shot of doing it in.
Yeah, no, this would be the only maybe 80s too, but yeah, the 80s and 90s would be the only year I could possibly pull this off. So yeah, no, that was good. That was good.
That's awesome, man. Well, Brian, just before we call it a night, I know you're writing a lot as always. I love reading your work over at the Hockey Writers. I think you've put out probably more than 10 articles already this year. Just do you have anything that you're working on or coming up or things that you're following that people can keep an eye out for?
Yeah, the next one I'm working on right now is kind of looking at how Zach Hyman was snubbed from the All-Star game, and maybe looking
Yeah.
at new ways the NHL can go about selecting their All-Stars to make sure that because obviously it's part of it's a big thing as a popularity contest, and it's for the fans, right? And you want to have the fans have a voice to get players there, but I think it's also important that players who are really deserving are recognized. So I've come up with a few different suggestions about how the NHL can maybe reformat how they pick all stars, where they can still check all the boxes of making sure every team has at least one representative and making sure fans get their voice, but then also making sure that the player with the fifth most goals in the league also gets to be there.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And I think that was a big mistake by the NHL not putting him there. I mean, I talked about this on the last episode I did too, but what an opportunity. Here's a guy who, like you said, is near the top of the goal scoring race. He's having the best year of his career, even topping last season, which many thought would be his career year. And just have it in his hometown. He's 31. Like, if not this year, when?
And that's
And
exactly it, right? I mean, and you just saw it was such a cool, the sort of the groundswell support from Oilers fans, really fans everywhere. You saw his dad. I know his dad retweeted some of your
his
stuff.
dad and I
just like,
we follow each other on Twitter, and he basically retweets anything I ever tweet about Zach, as well as many other people, any comments that they had about him. So like, huge supporter of him, and I was just so hoping that he would get there, because look, McDavid's been 7 times now. Draisaitl's been 6 times. They're going to go several more times in their career too, but this was going to be probably Zach Hyman's best chance to ever do it.
This is his best shot, and I'm kind of hoping that, and again, I don't wish injury or anything ill will upon anybody, but usually it almost always happens that, like, out of
someone backs out.
Yeah, there's 42 players in the All-Star game, right? Or 44. 44?
Yeah.
44 players in the All-Star game. The odds are that someone's probably going to get sick, and someone's probably going to get hurt, and someone's probably going to have to back out for a reason. So there's probably going to be a couple of roster openings. I hope that one way or another Hyman finds his way to Toronto yet.
Yeah, and it's a shame that some players do back out, because I think even if it is like, you're losing a bit of time that you could be spending on the beach with your family during that break, it's good that you get to have this experience, because most players never get the chance to play in an All-Star game. I remember Wayne Gretzky saying that in an interview, that he played in 18 All-Star games in his career. The only 2 he missed was in 93 when he had the injury, and 95 when there was the lockout. But he never turned it down, because he knew how many of his teammates would love to go just once, but were never going to get that chance. So he savored every opportunity. And there have been, like, I don't mean to like come down on a guy like Ovechkin or something who's turned it down multiple times in the past, but like, you'd think that all the superstars, if they get voted into it, that they would want to go be a part of this. And it's like sort of a celebration of the game. And for someone like Hyman, who won't have that chance now, it's disappointing for him, because it would have been really cool to see him in Toronto come back and representing the Oilers in the 2024 All-Star game.
Yeah, his hometown, in the arena where he started his career. I mean, it was poetic, really, right? So it's but you know what? Like I say, I mean, there could be, maybe he'll still find his way there yet. There's still almost 2.5 weeks until the All-Star game yet.
Yeah.
Who knows what happens? So.
But I totally agree with that, and I want to read your article, because they shouldn't have situations like this where a player is clearly an all-star. I wrote an article about Hyman recently too, saying he's an all-star regardless of if he gets voted in or not. And this is it's a shame that he's not going to get that opportunity, or like you said, still might, but he should have been a lock to be going.
For sure, for sure. So we'll see, but you know what? It's been a lot of fun watching what he's been achieving this season, and I think he's very much appreciated in Edmonton. We can
Oh
say
yeah.
that much.
He's got a
Yeah,
lot of Ryan Smith in him, which is a great way to endear yourself to the fans.
absolutely, absolutely.
All right, Brian, where can people find you?
At Twitter at Brian Swane. And that's pretty much it. I'm on Instagram, but rarely ever, so I couldn't even tell you what my handle is on Instagram. So find me on Twitter or find me on X. Sorry, find me on X.
They're gonna come more for your Oilers tweets than your photography skills. So
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Come for the random stats. You can
yeah,
find me there. Yeah.
you know, and I've shouted you out for this in the past, but I mean, you do more than just Oilers stats. You find in the summer Blue Jays stats a lot of the time, and even during the winter, I don't think I've seen anyone who is ever better at finding Canadian basketball stats. There's always some new fact that a Canadian basketball player has accomplished or milestone they've hit, and it's pretty cool to see that. So, yeah, credit to you for that. You're one of the people that I like to follow the most for kind of those interesting things that you dig up.
Well, I know we're kind of the same way. We both kind of have we both kind of dig these unique and kind of random facts and stats. So we
Yeah,
always have lots of fun chatting about them too. So I appreciate that.
without a doubt. All right, Brian, have a good night.
You too.
So for Brian Swane, I'm Eric Friesen. This has been the 99 Forever podcast. We're out.